All right, we are live with the Combatcast. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about UFC Fight Night from this past weekend, Garcia versus Onama. We're going to talk about this week's Brown and Bonfim. Bonfim? Yeah, good. Hey, I'm trying. And we'll also talk about some of this controversy going on with fixed fights in the UFC and maybe some other stuff. Who knows? But in the meantime, please, if you like us, like, subscribe, and Chevy, why don't you tell people what else we have coming up?
All right, November 15th, finally, these trash cards are over. UFC 322, Della Maddalena versus Makhachev, 10 p.m. from MSG. Looking forward to that one after these two awful cards. And then November 22nd, UFC Fight Night, Sarukian versus Hooker. That's 1 p.m. from Qatar. Looking forward to that one. Fantastic matchmaking there. And then the UFC is off the next week because I assume that is Thanksgiving weekend here in the US. That's November 29th. So we'll be reviewing that Hooker and Sarukian fight. And I'm sure we'll come up with something else for you guys.
Absolutely. All right. Let's get into this weekend's fight night here. Bonfim versus Brown. And we'll talk about co-main events, main event, but also Chevy. Any other fights on this card look interesting? On a card you already dubbed as crappy.
Yeah, well, this one is definitely on paper better than last week's. Another 7 p.m. Apex card here, but a couple good fights here. Christian Leroy Duncan versus Marco Tulio. Christian Leroy Duncan is definitely a guy to keep an eye out for. Tulio only has like 2 losses, so that's a good fight. Ricky Simone and Raoni Barcelos, always fun fight. Ricky Simone's, he's a wild man. And then Muslim Salikhov versus Uros Medic, or Medic, I mean. Salikhov is like this wild kickboxer guy. He's great, and Uros only another guy with only like 2 losses. So some fun fights.
Ricky Simone might be a trivia for like one of the few people who beat Marab someday.
Yeah, he choked him out.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's get into a co-main event here, though. Your boy Matt Schnell versus Joseph Morales.
Yeah, Matt Schnell. He is 17-9-1, 2 KOs, 9 subs, 5 decisions, 1 DQ victory. He's had a performance of the night, 2-time fight of the night. Joseph Morales, though, 13-2, 2 KOs, 7 subs, 4 decisions. He's on a 4-fight win streak right now. Matt has lost 3 out of the last 4. So keep that in mind, momentum. Morales also has had a performance of the night, and he's a former Ultimate Fighter 33 flyweight tournament winner. So should be fun. This one actually could be a little fun. I'm going to go with Morales actually by decision. I just think he's got a little more momentum, and I think that's key.
Yeah, Schnell has 3 wins in his last 9 fights. He lost 5 of them by decision. Or I'm sorry, by finish. He got finished 5 times in his last 9 fights. How is he a co-main event? It's this is Morales' second stint in the UFC. He went 1 for 3 in his first stint. Again, probably doesn't deserve to be a co-main event in the UFC. But he seems to do well on the regional level. Hasn't hit his stride in the big show here at the UFC. So I don't know how to break this one down. I'm just going to go with Matt Schnell because he has way more UFC experience. So I'll say Matt Schnell decision.
All right. Main event time. How are we here?
Main event. I'm more excited for this one for sure. Gabriel Bonfim versus Randy Brown.
Bonfim is 18-1, 3 KOs, 13 subs, 2 decisions. He's had a performance of the night, a fight of the night once, a former LFA welterweight champion as well. Brown, 20-5, 8 KOs, 5 subs, 7 decisions. He's won 4 out of his last 5. He's had 2 performances of the nights as well and a fight of the night. So both these guys got some good momentum going right now. You look at the KOs, you kind of give the edge to Randy Brown a little bit based on records. Subs, you go with Bonfim based on records here. Interesting matchup. I think I'm going to go Brown by decision.
Yeah, like you said, Bonfim, very dangerous grappler. He's done very well since winning on the Contender Series in 2022. But Randy's been around a long time. I think he's been in the UFC since like 2016, and all his losses are to high level guys. So
right.
He's also very well rounded. So I think he's gonna break into the top 15 here with a TKO win. I'll say round 4. I think it'd be later on.
All right, there we go. And we are working backwards today because we're going to be leading to something at the end here. But let's look at this past week's UFC Fight Night. Garcia versus Onama. Yeah, another banger of a card. But at least the co-main and main event were quick. Before we get to one of the other fights of notice, any other fights you want to talk about here?
No.
Okay, let's get right to our co-main event.
Waldo Cortez Acosta versus Ante Delea.
Yeah. To me, the first round looked like, they were kind of, both jabbing at each other. And then it was like the last minute left, it just felt like they were kind of going for it. And Waldo just started unloading on him and had the better hands. It's heavyweight, right? And although there was the eye poke here too.
Oh my God, that was such a big deal. The eye poke was a huge deal. Yeah. So obviously Waldo technically he gets a round 1 KO, but so basically Ante poked him in the eye. Mark Smith doesn't see it. The ref doesn't see it, and Waldo covers up. Ante goes in for the finish. Mark steps in and clearly waves off the fight. Like clear as day, he waved off the fight. The corners come in, and then Mark wants to see the replay, to which he then notices that there was an eye poke. And then after 5 minutes go by of doing all this, the fight, he restarts the fight. And shortly after that, Waldo KOs Ante. So it's worth noting Ante is Tom Aspinall's training partner that he recently said that he praised him and said he would never fight him or whatever, and Ante went on a tirade during fight week basically, and he was like, I don't understand how you can eye poke someone. I have all these fights, I've never eye poked anyone, there should be severe punishments. And then he eye pokes a guy in the next round or the next fight. So bummer for him. Obviously, he thought he won the fight. There's a big adrenaline drop after you think you win the fight. And then he gets KO'd very quickly. Respect to Cortez Acosta because, he did fight through the eye poke. It was his eye was bloodshot days after. So it was clearly a real eye poke and injury. And, he came back and won. But just the reffing, not understanding what's going on. I think they were panicking. Ariel talked about this on his podcast too. Panicking because, they had the issues the week before with Tom and everything. So they wanted to make sure they got it right. And it's just
their problems.
Yeah. It's just a real shit show. Like the consistency just doesn't make sense, but yeah, that fight happened. Waldo calls out Tom Aspinall, of course. That fight's not happening. I mean, Tom's got to fight somebody, but I don't know.
He'll be still gone, I imagine, after.
After that, but
yeah. Right.
I mean, assuming he wins and assuming he can see again. I haven't heard anything. Last time I heard, he still couldn't see very well. So, all right, let's move on. Main event here: Steve Garcia versus David Onama.
Did not last long. Another first round finish. Garcia just looked a lot quicker than me. And I don't know what else to really say. Looked a lot quicker on his feet and looked to be a couple levels better than Onama. So hopefully this kid gets a bigger fight soon.
Yeah, dominant performance. I agree with you. I thought speed was a big issue for Onama. I thought the stoppage was a tiny bit early, but I mean, the fight is like not for a title or anything like that. Better to live and fight another day. So Onama will be back. But yeah, I think probably a big fight for Garcia next. I think that was like 6 or 7 wins in a row for him.
Yeah. Well, good for him. Hopefully, like I said, bigger fight. All right, let's kind of combine this segment with what's around the ring, because there was another fight on this card that ended up becoming a lot more newsworthy after all was said and done.
Yeah, Yadir Davali versus Isaac Dulgarian. So I wrote some notes here. I'm just going to rattle off basically a list of what kind of happened. So Dulgarian was a minus 200 something favorite. And then the day of the fight, there's a big swing in the betting line. So the UFC notices this. They have like a company that's dedicated to watching these sort of things. The sports betting companies flag this fight and they shut down the bets on them, which is a very big indicator that there's an issue going on. So the UFC decides they're going to speak to Isaac and his lawyer and make sure that he doesn't have any injuries, no debts, and no agreements with anyone regarding the fight. And Isaac says no, he's good, so the fight proceeds.
He's going to tear this guy up or kill this guy or something, I think.
Yeah. He said, no, I'm going to kill this guy. Yeah. According to Dana White. So,
right.
And, Isaac's known for his good grappling and being very ferocious in the first round. He 10-8'd Christian Rodriguez in the first round, in their fight. And he goes out in this fight and gets subbed in round 1, which was a huge betting line. A lot of bets came in on him to be subbed in round 1. So while he got subbed, he was also defending terribly. He wasn't even doing the most basic shit that you or I could know just being MMA fans. So
he was trying to hit that.
He didn't fight the hands at all. He was just trying to punch behind him. At one point, he was just holding his arms out and waiting to tap. Terrible. So DC on the commentary, Chiesa on the analyst booth, both heavily critiqued him and his defense. Obviously, they didn't know anything about the betting line stuff at that point. So that was, just honest assessment from them.
And Felder,
another good indicator. Yeah. Another good indicator, that there was something fishy going on. Then the sports betting sites then pay back all the people who bet on that fight and lost, which they're not in the business of just handing out free money. So obvious indicator of fishy behavior, and then finally Dana talked yesterday, I think, and he put out a video and he said that he contacted the FBI as soon as the fight ended and Dulgarian was released the next day from the UFC. He's since been released from his gym, Factory X, who condemned whatever actions he may or may not have done. This was all broke by, I just want to shout out the guy on Twitter because I've never heard of him before this time, but Harry Mack on X broke the story. He says there are over 100 fights that are under investigation. And he also implied a lot of Jason Herzog fights, allegedly. So Jason Herzog, what I would constitute as generally a good referee. I know a lot of people don't agree with that assessment, but I think he's one of the better ones. But they apparently they're looking into him. So there's also, since this has all come out, a lot of fighters have come out on X and said that they've been approached to throw fights. Dana was not happy to hear that.
Dana thought it was weird. He said, why are you coming out now then? Why wouldn't you come out to begin with if this happened? Mark Goddard, another official that I think is really good, by the way, that gets heat from people. But I would agree. I think Mark Goddard and Jason Herzog are like, as far as officials today, not counting John McCarthy, I feel like they're the top 2 right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And, of course, just playing devil's advocate, and I don't know, and I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything. We don't even know if this guy's guilty or anything yet. really. But as Dana said, it doesn't look good. But as far as her side goes, I guess if you didn't want to be caught, I would try to be a great fucking referee anyway and do the best job I could. So it's probably neither here nor there. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, and Dana White, just to bring up that point too, he does deny that there's 100 fights being investigated. He said that that's clickbait. He said it's just this one, and they contacted immediately.
Of course, though, Dana would say that. But
right, Dana would say that, and also too, like, you know, there's ways of kind of with the truth. I mean, like, you're working only on this fight. You know, that doesn't mean that there's not potential fights or anything else that could be just, you know, even looked at or been looked at in a different way. I'd be curious to see. And I'm sure we're not going to hear this anyway. Like, you know, it'd be always cool to, like, in this case in particular, it's always cool if you can know the sources, right? But it'd be really cool in this case just to find out, because, like, are there levels to what fights are being investigated? You know what I mean? Like, are there stuff where I go, oh, that looks a little weird. All right, that seems to check out. Nothing there. Whereas, like, this one was like, okay, this is fucking very strange.
Yeah. You know, so what were your thoughts when you heard this? Because personally, for me, obviously, we know that this is always, I mean, in all sports. I mean, you know, they have the whole thing with the NBA. I think we brought up on here before, you know, in all sports, especially with the current climate of, like, sports betting, it's so prevalent. It casts, you know, there's the opportunity for a lot of this kind of activity. And, you know, maybe it's just ignorance on my part, but I kind of just felt that, you know, well, they don't really do that here in the UFC, you know. But since this has come up, I feel like, you know, it's just a glass shattering moment for me. And I'm like, oh, you know, you see all these, you know, suspicious, inconsistent reffing decisions, all this terrible judging. And there's so many ways to win a UFC fight, and so many variables that happen in MMA, so many opportunities to take a dive or get caught in a choke or whatever. And it is cast a long, dark shadow over the sport for me currently.
I guess the thing is like, you got to look at, like, motives too. It's a little probably more susceptible for fighters who aren't making a ton of money.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you're making a ton of money, I don't know. I'm going to throw a guy out there that probably we know is probably fine. Like an Israel Adesanya, right? He's making a ton of money, right? There's really not much motivation to try to throw, you know, your career down the toilet for something like this.
It's not even necessarily the money at that level too. I mean, the money is a big part, but just having, like, fighters have so much ego and they're so wrapped up into this persona that they put out, and losing a fight really hurts a lot of these guys. So I think, you know, just on principle and their ego, a lot of those guys at that level, when you get to that level, you're not just going to throw it for some money.
It was interesting you say that, because one of the things Dana White did say too is, I don't know why you would even be thinking that when you're fighting at this level in the UFC. And I was like, well, this goes back to fighter pay though, right? Because now some of these guys are in, like, the top company in the world, and they're still can't afford to pay their bills. And so this is where you're going to have potential things like this happen.
Devil's advocate for that, though. Going back to the NBA thing, the guys who are wrapped up in this NBA thing they're making millions, multi-million dollars a year. So, you know, I do think fighters are a different breed than, you know, necessarily NBA players and stuff.
Yeah.
They're different when it comes to, you know, throwing something. You're the only guy or girl out there in the ring. Everything's on you. All the heat after you lose is going to come down on you, as opposed to you're part of a team where you can say you had an off night and miss a few shots or whatever.
And here's another thing too. You're making so much money. You don't really give a fuck. It's the other side. Now you're just greedy to make more money, and it doesn't directly necessarily affect your business as an NBA player. Like, you're locked in. Whereas if you're a UFC fighter and you want to win and your legacy, everything is tied in how you win and how you perform. Unless you're very, very rare, like a Conor McGregor, where your personality just catapulted you to this another level. And even he had to win fights early on.
Right.
So I think there's a lot more reason to not cheat if you're a fighter. And I think what's going to happen is, and I remember hearing about this when I was a kid, with my father talking about boxing and stuff like that, why you didn't see a lot of fixed fights on a big heavyweight championship level because there was so much money involved. And he'd always talk about the federal government getting involved. And Dana White would talk about meeting with the FBI, which is kind of fucking mind-blowing too, by the way, too. This is like, you know what I mean? There's so much money tied in this, but it's always the money, right? It's like, but I think there could be a certain amount of ignorance to it too, right? Like you have so many people fighting in the UFC, rushing in, that maybe they don't even understand, like, your career's fucking over at this point. Like, you're done. So if you truly want to do this, you probably won't. I guess the flip side of that, though, is if you're a guy that's thinking, hey, man, I'm never going to be one of the top guys, let me just get the fuck out of here, then maybe you would take the dive.
Say there are guys in the UFC who are struggling to just pay bills and stuff. It's not cheap to be a fighter either.
Mm-hmm.
You got a lot of coaches, you got managers, doing a training camp. All that is very expensive. And when you're making, 12 and 12 or whatever, and if you lose, you get half your pay.
Right.
You walk away with almost nothing sometimes. So I get it at the lower level for sure. But long term, you're throwing away.
Mm-hmm.
Dana's talked about federal prison. You're looking at federal prison. So, I appreciate Dana coming out and making a statement, but also I expect that from him. He doesn't really shy away from that kind of stuff. He might put his own spin on it, but he'll come out and talk about it. But I would, as far as like him getting the FBI involved, Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, is in the stands at fights sometimes. So Dana and Trump are very close friends. So I assume that Dana has enough sway with the UFC or with the FBI or whatever, where he's going to be able to keep some stuff. Maybe I'm not implying the UFC is implicated in this or at fault for this in any way. I honestly don't think they are. It's not good for the business. So, but if there's any way for them to sweep some facts under the rug or whatever to protect the UFC's name,
they probably could.
It will. I assume it will happen. So
I guess the thing I thought about too is like, it's just so, for those who are wondering if the UFC is involved in this, like, to me, that's a no-win situation for them because, their whole thing is that, we're as real as it gets. And that's been one of their core business things. If they were going to fix a fight, which I don't think they would, because again, it'd be the bigger fights that would mean something for their business.
Right.
If their business is doing so well and there's so much risk to hurting that business that you wouldn't even, and especially, you know what I mean? Like, you could offer a guy like Michael Chandler to take a dive for Conor, and then Michael Chandler comes out and speaks out this, then it's just like, it's a fucking mess. So why would you bother? It's going to be these lower level fights, and it's probably going to be another party involved that are going to like try to influence them to take a dive so they can make some money. Hopefully that even if there has been other cases, hopefully this kind of deters things for a while and maybe shuts it down. Maybe that might be the good thing because, this, if you're thinking of doing it, this can't be something you saw and go, ooh, no thanks.
I bet the UFC also is going to implement some, procedures or checks and balances behind the scenes to make sure, because that is so dangerous for their brand, for their the image of the UFC. This is like one of the worst things that could happen to them, really, because it puts the whole sport in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's a low level enough fighter on a small card that it can go unnoticed and you can bury it. And like you said, there's other people, and I think it's a weird situation because they probably part of them probably wants to bury this, but they also want to make an example out of this guy.
Yeah, I think I agree. They want to make an example, especially because this is the second time or third time. I mean, there was a Korean fighter, which I think was kind of an isolated thing, and then they had the James Krause thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think this for the UFC is more of a neglect and incompetence thing than like them actually being nefarious, because they just have so many. This is a result of having 700 fighters and just putting out slop over and over again. You know, things are going to get overlooked when you're just putting out this much stuff. So
that's then again, too, and that's what I think too. And now you're rushing these guys' careers are getting here, you know, quicker than they probably should. You're young, you're making mistakes in life. You haven't even fully realized, you know, like what you're potentially doing. That I'm sure,
right.
There's a good potential chance, as dumb as it sounds, that the fighter taking it out doesn't even realize he could go to fucking prison over something like this.
Right. Yeah.
He could probably
no idea.
Yeah, but me taking a dive, it's like, no, you know, money is the one thing that, that this country.
You know, I bet in those fighter meetings, Dana will be.
Oh, now for
making sure they know going forward. You know, if someone approaches you and you don't say something, we will. He also said that. Obviously, he has to say this, but he said that if anything like this happens, the UFC is going after you full force with whatever guns ablazing, with the FBI or the commission or whoever they can get on their side. They're going to go after these fighters too, because obviously it hurts their brand. So,
all right. Since this is what's around the ring, I'm going to throw you a curveball here. All right. I'm going to give you one more subject to tackle because I know you recently listened to this, and I'm curious because I saw some clips on it today. Dominic Cruz has a new podcast, and he had the Raya Faber on it. I saw a couple of clips of their interaction. I thought it looked pretty good. I want to go check it out now. What were your impressions?
Yeah, it started off a little stiff, but first episode of a podcast is always going to be a little bit awkward. Dom is Dom, so he's a little like kind of prickly, but obviously been much better recently, and that's a lot of what the podcast is about, him kind of finding that balance in his life of just from going where everything is. The podcast is called Love and War, so that balance between warrior and then, you know, trying to balance that out with the love in his life. So he had his biggest rival, Uriah Faber, on. And they were very friendly, very complimentary of each other. They watched clips of their fights, and they talked about like where they were at mentally. They talked about a lot of stuff. I thought it was very good. I'm definitely going to watch going forward. Dom mentioned that he wanted to have all the alpha male guys he fought on there because
he did.
Yeah, so TJ was one that was brought up. He definitely wants to have on there. He wants to have Cody on there. And just like kind of talk it out with these guys about where he was. You know, I got a lot of insights into Cruz that I didn't know about him. So good understanding of him. But yeah, I'm going to keep checking it out for sure.
And just funny because just a little bit I saw of it, you could see him and Faber were very friendly to each other, like you said. And I did see that, but I also could see when you mentioned it, like how Dom could be a little prickly. Uriah, you could see why he was such a good rival is Uriah was almost like one of the original trolls. Like he knew how to like troll Cruz.
That was his thing. Is he'd like to get a rise out of Dom. Like he'll say the things that he knows. You know, he doesn't care if
Dom would do that back too. When he that's why I think they were such great rivals, and to see them at this point in their careers where they've moved on and they both were successful, and you know, made sure it looks like to make sure that they had money elsewhere, that they're not, you know, struggling or anything like that, like other people.
I saw they like went out to lunch afterwards on Instagram, and they like did a little joke video of Cruz getting down to help Faber up into his truck because, you know, Faber's so small. So yeah, it was good to see them joking around.
Sorry.
I got another curveball for you too here. So I did see right before we got on here, we talked about Gervonta Davis and
Oh,
Jake Paul, that fight was not happening. So today, Nate Diaz versus Jake Paul 2 is going to replace the Gervonta Davis fight, but
still?
it's going to be at a different date.
Yeah.
So, later on. But what do you think about this?
It's totally uninteresting to me. Now, listen, I mean, look, at this point, we should probably know what a Jake Paul fight is and not really expect much. But if you're going to do them and you're going to try to entice people, you have to try to at least bring something new to the table. Gervonta was something new. He was a guy you were a lot bigger than. You should be able to push around, but he was a much more skilled boxer who happened to be smaller. So there was this kind of catch, and he was a different type of fighter. Now you're going back to a fight that we've already seen with a guy who, to my knowledge, has not been like boxing anybody else or doing it. You know what I mean? So
he's only getting older and slower. Yeah.
So the only value is that Nate still has somewhat of a name. It'd have been more interesting if you'd done it with Nick at this point, honestly. Like, not that I think that's a good fight, but at least from a promoter, yeah, it would have been more interesting. So, no, that's horrible news, and I would imagine Netflix won't even air that. That would be the only thing good for him, is if Netflix was like so behind Jake and everything like that they would do that. But yeah, good luck trying to get people to buy that again. I can't imagine that there's going to be too many people rushing out to buy that. Like Nate, like to see him make some money. Maybe that's a part of it. Maybe Jake just realized Nate's a great back and forth verbally, and he'll get some more money with somebody like a Nate, especially on last minute notice. But yeah, very little interest. I would almost prefer they try to get another boxer, even the same size as Gervonta, but skilled and a catchweight. That would even be more interesting to me than seeing Nate here again.
Yeah, Ryan Garcia was a name that was thrown out. Francis Ngannou was a name that was thrown out.
That could be. Yeah. Now that could be a very bad night for Jake. But you know what? That is a big potential win, assuming everything's on the up with these Jake Paul fights. That's always a question, right? When you're talking about fixed fights and stuff before. I don't know how much regulation's involved in Jake Paul's fights.
Yeah, but we're not accusing you, Jake, of fixed fights in any way.
But because I know there's going to be that saying, when you talk about this guy, that all his fights are fixed. So assuming that everything's on the up and up, and he's just picking guys that he has an advantage over, that he can either outbox or whatever the case is, it's interesting because I don't know who's had more boxing experience between him and Francis, but I know Francis has a shit ton more power, and that would
he knocked down Tyson Fury.
I just think he would lay out Jake Paul, honestly. But the fact that Francis, I think he was exposed to at the same time against Joshua. Joshua was a much more skilled boxer like that. Jake Paul doesn't have that, obviously, too. So
he doesn't hit as, I know he has power, but he does not hit as hard as Anthony Joshua.
No. I'm just trying to break it down. I expect that Francis would just destroy him, but
he would do what he did to Rosenstruck. He just run across the ring, swinging his arms like that, and knock him out. That would be what the fight happened.
100%. You're 100% right. But if you're Jake and you're looking at somebody with limited boxing experience and you want to try to cash out and you were hoping, that would be the fight. Yeah, that would be the fight because you hope, you know what I'm saying? But man, good fucking luck.
If that was a pay-per-view, I would pay for that.
Yeah, that would be one I would hope Netflix would pick up, though. I would hope they would try to get that stuff, too.
Yeah, I don't have Netflix, but I would stream that one illegally. But if it was on pay-per-view, I would pay for that one because I'd love to see Francis get a shot at that. Why he didn't agree to that, he said it was an easy fight, which I personally think for him, I always pick against Jake for the most part, but for Francis, I really would. So why he didn't just accept the fight and go in there and get paid to knock out a YouTuber, I don't understand. I'll never understand. So he didn't agree, and Nate did. So I guess respect for Nate. Go get your money to get beat up by a YouTuber again.
Makes you kind of wonder what Francis is looking for sometimes. I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway, all right. Why don't we get out of here? We're going over 30 minutes a day. Bonfim versus Brown and Chevy. Why don't you tell people we got coming up one more time?
All right, November 15th, UFC 322, Della Maddalena versus Makhachev. That's Islam moving up to fight for the welterweight belt. That's 10 p.m. from MSG in New York. And then November 22nd, another early card, 1 p.m. for Qatar. It's UFC Fight Night, Sarukian versus Hooker. That's a lightweight title contender eliminator fight. And then November 29th, no fights that weekend. So we'll be reviewing the Sarukian and Hooker fight, and I'm sure we'll come up with some other stuff to talk about.
All right, guys. Enjoy Bonfim versus Brown this weekend, and we'll see you next time talking about more fights.